this fantastic gem is called Public Speaking, a very practical introduction. If you guys are interested, I will put the link in the chat in a minute. And with this, Carlos gives all the mysteries about speech writing and public speaking a very interesting and personal effect and aspect, because he uses all he learned in public speaking and Toastmasters in personal situations and everyday situations. I am not going to talk anymore because the floor should be left for Carlos to start this fantastic and exciting first part of the evening, which is the workshop on speech writing. Please join me in welcoming Carlos Gimeno with Speech Writing Workshop. Over to you, Carlos. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Enka, for your generous introduction. One of my values is gratitude. And I'd like to begin by saying a few thank yous tonight, if I may. First thank you goes to Andra, Sandra, Rebecca, Enka, and Henry for inviting me to be here today and for organizing this wonderful evening. Thank you very much. The second thank you goes to my co-panelists, who you will meet later on today, Judith Humphrey and Matthew Rees. Thank you both for being with us tonight, and I'm looking forward to learning from you both. And finally, a thank you to all of you for being here tonight. You could have been anywhere else and you chose to be here, and I'm grateful for it. As the first slide says, we are here tonight to discuss speech writing. And I'm hoping I will bring some light into the mysteries and the challenges of writing your speeches and presentations, and we'll complement that with the panel towards the end. Stop me at any time if you feel brave enough to unmute yourself and ask a question. Make comments, make questions, make observations either directly to me or through the chat, and our production team will be keeping an eye on the chat to make sure we capture your questions and comments. And because not all of you know me, some of you do, but not all of you know me, we thought we would begin our session today with a poll. A poll? Yes, a poll to get your juices flowing and break the ice and get ourselves started thinking about the subject of speech writing. So my colleague Andra is going to put up a quick question on the screen, which you'll have a minute to respond to, and then we'll see the results in a few seconds as well. And then I'm interested to see what you all think. Okay, Andra, as soon as you've got those results, feel free to put them up on the screen for everyone to see.
First, last chance to vote. There we go.
Okay, so if you were asked to write and deliver a commencement address speech for Harvard University, what would you write and speak about? And 57 of you guys have chosen yourself your story, which, as you will learn later today, is the right answer. Well done, everybody. That's a really good initial exercise to get us started. And now we're going to move on to the actual session, which today will have 4 elements. I like keeping things nice and simple. So tonight I'm going to cover the why and the how of speech writing, the what, also important, a couple of extras towards the end. I'm feeling generous tonight, and I will bring my session to an end with a few resources I'd like to share with you and a CTA, or a call to action. During my session, we're going to have 2 breakout rooms sessions. Don't worry. Don't panic, nice and easy. Andrea will put all of us in groups of 5 or 6 attendees for us to discuss a couple of questions I'm gonna give you, so you can take a break from listening to me and interact with each other. So 4 elements, 2 breakout rooms, and then I'll bring it to an end and we'll move on to the break and the panel. And as I said, any questions or comments, stop me and shout. I'm going to begin with why speech writing is important and why we're here today, and how you go about writing your speeches in a way that is less daunting and a bit easier. Writing your speeches is important because it helps you clarify your ideas, first of all. Secondly, it takes your thoughts into something physical, something you can see, something you can touch, something you can edit. And if you're using pencil and paper, which I hope you are, something you can even smell. It helps you make changes and it helps you improve your final products as you go along. And the choice of photograph here is deliberate. Let me explain. Many of you, when you hear the word speech writing, or when you have to write a speech, what do? You open your laptops. That's not a speech writing, that's a speech typing. And that's not good. By writing your speech with a pencil or a pen, you have a physical connection with your speech, something you feel, something you learn as you go along, and something you can identify with. And it also helps you remember some of the things you will be saying. And I know some of you will have questions about memorizing versus not memorizing, and we can touch on that later. But whatever you do, writing your speech down by hand will help you remember the important things you have to say. So key thought number 1 for today: forget about speech typing, focus on speech writing. Some of you may be thinking, hang on a second, writing is a bit of a pain and I'm not very fast. I'm better at drawing. I enjoy drawing pictures and storyboarding. That is a valid option too. Storyboarding is fantastic, and as it happens, something you can do on a computer as well. Not my favorite choice, but something you can do because it gives you that helicopter view on your speech. It will capture a key idea, a key point in your speech for each of the windows in your storyboarding. And it's good to have that drawing exercise, as I said, as with the case of writing, to connect with the story, to connect with your thoughts, and if you're good at drawing, to have fun. Ideally, you should do both. Write your words down as in much detail as you can, and then draw a sketch that you can follow, as I said, in a more helicopter view approach. So key distinction: the writer versus the illustrator. Whoever you are, go for it, but you need to choose one of them. If you can mix them both, even better. And that's just the first reflection, first thoughts I wanted to share with you today. The other question some of you may be asking is, okay, so I start writing, how long do I need to write? How many pages do I need for a speech? And I'm going to share with you my experience, both in Toastmasters and I was going to say real life. Toastmasters is real life, but those of you who are in Toastmasters know what I mean. So whenever you're writing a speech, my experience tells me that for every 5 minutes of verbal delivery, you're going to need a page, an A4 of written material. If you read or deliver 1 page of written material and you need longer than 5 minutes, you're speaking too slowly. If you need less than 5 minutes, you're speaking too quickly. And those of you who know me will know that I'm on the slower side of public speaking, but that's better because it gives you gravitas, it gives you control, and it gives you authority. So 5 minutes, 1 page, 10 minutes, 2 pages, 15 minutes, 3 pages, and so on and so forth. That rule doesn't really apply to really long speeches. If you have to speak for an hour, say, or you have to deliver a keynote address, that rule may not be as easily applicable. But for speeches between 5 and 30 minutes, the 5 minutes, 1 page rule of thumb will serve you well. I've always believed that speech writing is a bit like going on holidays or going on a business trip. Before the taxi picks you up to take you to the airport, what do you need to know? You need to know where you're going, right? You need to know the destination. So we're going to the Greek islands, so we're going to visit Henry in Washington, or we're going to see Enka in Oxford, or whatever it may be. With the speech writing, is the same. If you start writing and you have no idea what the destination is, you're in big trouble. You'll get bored, you'll get confused, and you'll give up. What do I mean by destination? Your destination is the message you want to share with your audience, the change you want to drive with your speech, the impact you want to make with your words, the call to action that will come at the end of your speech. You need to be clear in your mind before you get that pencil or that pen, where you're going, because that's going to help you build the beginning and the middle before you arrive into that glorious conclusion and call to action. So you need the destination, you need the hotel, you need the transportation, you need your family and the luggage, and all those elements and what they look like will, to a degree, depend on where you're going. So whenever you write your next speech, think, what do I want to achieve with this piece of performance, with this piece of writing? What do I want to change? Where am I going? And that will help you begin that process of creative writing. Facing a blank piece of paper is a challenge for all of us. All of a sudden, it becomes easier and faster if you know where you're going. Okay, so I've spoken about the writer versus the illustrator. We've talked about the recommended timings when it comes to writing in this first phase of tonight's workshop, and we've covered the key concept of the destination. Great. What do I write about? So many things you could write about, right? Which one do I pick? Which theme, which topic, which subject, which person, which year, which pandemic? There are 3 sources from where you can draw ideas and material for your speech writing activities. The first one is a little controversial, and it will inform and it will become the basis of the discussion you're going to have in a minute in groups after these slides. The first source of ideas and inspiration for speech writing is you, yourself, your life, your story, your family, your work, your interests, your social media, your dog, your cat, your children, your world. Hang on a second, Carlos, you're getting a little excited. I don't like talking about myself. Well, but you are the one delivering the speech. You are the one writing it. You have to talk about yourself, whether you like it or not. The best way to connect with audiences, the best way to connect with people, the best way to succeed at speech writing and speech delivery is to be comfortable with who you are, what your story is, and what you are about, what change you want to bring to the world. And I know it's difficult. Some of us may be shy, may prefer to talk about something else, but you are the center of your speech writing and your speech delivery action. So get as comfortable as you can with that and begin sharing that with the world. Number two, once you've done that, it's the world around you, your friends, things you're interested in, things you'd like to achieve, things you'd like to follow, the industry you work in, universities you've studied at or you've worked for. Anything next to your immediate world can become a useful source of content, material, and ideas for you. So if you want to step away slightly from you and your closest world, the more private dimension of your life, and step into the frontier of the world around you, there is a second layer of inspiration and material that you can get inspiration and motivation from. And finally, number three, the world. The pandemic, I know you don't want to talk about this, but the pandemic, COVID, world poverty, climate change, the future of the Homo sapiens species on the planet, economics, politics, philosophy, medicine, you name it. There are literally millions of things you could speak about. Pick the ones that you're interested in and the ones that link back to you and your story. And the paper, not the computer, the paper is yours. So those three, and I'm about to begin that breakout room session with the help of Andra for all of you to discuss this. The three key sources for inspiration when it comes to speech writing: you, your world, and the world at large. But that's Carlos's theory. And if I've learned one thing during the 43 years that I've been on the planet is other people have other ideas, and I want to hear your ideas. So now Andra is going to send you into little groups for you to discuss the three sources of inspiration and material I've shared with you today, and more importantly, add new ones that you've had experience with, you can think of, or you'd like to recommend to this group. Now, because it's so many of us tonight, we're not going to have time to feedback from all groups live. So if as a group you come up with a great idea, with a great suggestion, or with an objection to some of the things I've said, send them through to the chat and we'll make sure we capture them for everyone to read and see. If you have a burning desire to share that idea, that objection with the group, unmute yourself and go for it.
Carlos, have you stopped sharing on purpose? Oh, you're muted.
Not on purpose, no.
Okay, that's interesting. If you want to, yeah, bring your presentation back up. I'm happy to.
No worries.
That's why I wonder why that happened. It didn't happen when we practiced. Oh,
yes.
you know, wait a minute. You know why? Because when we practiced, I didn't assign you to a breakout room.
That could be it. That could be it. No worries.
It must have overwritten the whole thing. But
do you know if Enka is on her own in that breakout room? Shall I?
No, Enka's not on her own. Enka's joined one of the other breakout rooms.
Okay. I forgot to tell everyone the time they've got to do this.
I can broadcast a message.
Great. Thank you, Andra. That's fantastic. Thank you.
A second. We've got some new people. Sandra, are you assigned? You're not assigned to a breakout room.
Sorry. Yeah, I have connection troubles. Just joined.
Okay. I'm just going to send you to a breakout room if that's okay. And Saad, you're just about to connect. How many minutes would you like them to have?
Let's give them another 4 because we didn't tell them, and I'm sure they will be excited to talk lots amongst themselves. So 3 more minutes, 4 more minutes, if that's okay.
Sure. Saad, I'm going to assign you to a breakout room for this activity.
Okay. Ondra, my friend Irene is deliberately out here because she doesn't speak much English.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So we'll keep her here if that's okay, and I'm going to have a brief chat with her if that's okay.
Sure. I'm going to.
Irene, ¿cómo estás?
Buenas.
Hola, me alegro de verte. Ya he visto el apellido que has escogido y me encanta.
Sí, la verdad es que es un apellido muy espabilado.
Perfecto, es el apellido perfecto.
Acabo de salir ahora.
Estupendo, me alegro de que te hayas podido conectar.
La verdad es que no he entendido nada.
Oh, no.
Bueno, no te preocupes.
¿Tu compañera habla español?
Un poquito.
Creo que no.
Un poquito.
¡Hey! Ondra, hablas español, genial.
Un poquito de español. Yo comprendo más que...
Que puedes hablar. Bueno, eso nos pasa a todos con todos los idiomas. Es más fácil.
No me pasa.
Muy bien, muy bien. Pues nada, Irene, me alegro de que te hayas unido. Aún me quedan otros 20 minutos más o menos.
Creo que Sí, es verdad. Dice mi compañera que lo has hecho muy bien, ¿a que sí, Ana?
Aunque no te haya entendido nada, pero lo has hecho muy bien.
Me alegro de que os haya gustado.
Hemos estado, vamos, atentas como si fuera la Casa de Papel.
Me parece muy bien. Chicas, el resto de grupos van a volver en unos 2 minutos y yo voy a prepararme psicológicamente para seguir, pero quería saludaros rápidamente. Gracias por unirnos a nosotros.
Ay, gracias a ti por hablar también. Es verdad, es verdad. La pena es no haberte entendido. Tenemos que darle al inglés.
Ondra, how long do we have left, do you know?
3 more minutes altogether.
Okay.
So on the topic of sharing, I think the recommendation, sorry to interrupt your conversation.
No,
You might want to say goodbye to your friends.
Go for it.
If you want to open the floor to someone, then you could potentially just, rather than asking them, just a suggestion, because there's so many people. I'm going to mute Irene.
Yes,
because
thank
there's
you.
so many people on the line. If 4 go at the same time, then we might run the risk of clashes. So maybe if you want to ask them to raise their hand instead, and then you can select someone, or if you want, I can select someone.
That's a very sensible suggestion. Thanks, Ondra. I hadn't thought of that. Thanks very much.
I'm going to send them a broadcast, another email to remember that they'll be able to share their thoughts in the comment section.
Right. That's really good. Thank you.
Using the chat.
Ondra, when you've done that, how is it coming across in terms of pace, sound, and visuals?
It's really good. It's really good. Yeah.
Great. Good to know. Thank you.
I like you've made a very good point on the pace, and I think it's quite small and digestible chunks.
Yes.
So it's very, very good to follow, very good pace.
Thank you.
Okay. Can you see the message? And you can't see the messages that I'm broadcasting.
I'm seeing one now in blue. Yes.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Yes. Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Okay. So it's now 1944. They've been in there for 5 minutes now. I'm going to close their rooms, and some will come back immediately, or some will stay and wait it out. So these 60 seconds is something we should account for. So you can potentially start the conversation.
Yes.
Now
I'll wait for a few seconds, but then I'll.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Ondra.
All right. So I'm going to close the rooms now.
Okay.
And there'll be another set of breakout rooms, you said.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
And we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
My profuse apologies. I haven't got a meeting ID, or I can't get in to join your meeting. That's why I'm outside it. I cannot find the what I should be typing to join your meeting.
You are already in the meeting. Everyone else is in an activity, which if you probably weren't here for that bit, but that's okay. So everyone else is in breakout rooms. They've got another 20 seconds, and then they're all going to come back. So don't worry about it.
I understand that, and I can see it, but I have not joined the meeting. I'm on my little phone. I'm not on my computer.
Oh, I see. You're not in the, okay.
No, because I haven't got the meeting number that I should be typing in, the meeting ID.
We can see you and hear you well, Anne, despite the fact that you're on your phone. That's great.
Well,
thanks for joining us.
If you could bear this, that's fine. My profuse apologies then.
No worries, no worries. You come across nice and clear.
It's amazing that there's.
Sorry, Anne, I had to unmute you. I had to mute you. So welcome back, everyone. Carlos, back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Ondra. I sent you all into the breakout rooms without telling you how long you were going to be there. It could have been an hour. So thanks, Ondra, for sorting that out and clarifying the expected length of the breakout rooms discussion. I'm delighted to have Ondra today with me for many reasons. One of them is she's reminded me that if you all unmute yourselves at once, we're going to have a bit of a crisis. So if you really want to share some of the thoughts you've had in those discussions, raise your hand on the Zoom functionality, and then Ondra will see you and will bring you to life so you can ask that question or share that comment. If none of you want to speak out loud, that's okay. Please send your thoughts, your conclusions, your ideas, your objections to what I said through the chat, so every one of us can benefit from those conversations. And while you do that, one of the reasons we've done this was to get all of you to know each other and to talk to each other, to take a break from me and my voice, and then get ready for step 2, which we are about to begin. But I'm going to give you 5 or 10 seconds in case there are any brave soldiers out there who want to say something.
I don't mind. I'll say something. Carlos?
Go for it, Muriel. Thank you.
I think we had a great exchange with people from various clubs, even a colleague all the way from Australia, 4 in the morning out there. So fascinating audience tonight. We said we agree that our source of impression about people, but I love the text of Katie, who was a psychiatrist. She said it's our own perception about the people and the stories. So I thought that was really insightful. And Jim, for him, his tech is from music, songs, stories, and film stories. So that was just a couple of highlights from our group.
That's really good. Thank you so much, Muriel and Tim. Thanks very much for sharing that. Very thoughtful. I believe we've got Georgia there, Ondra, trying to say something as well.
Yes.
So just the only thing I would like to add, which comes as a reassuring surprise, at least for me, is in all the in the room I was, and also here in the plenary session, I can feel that is a common ground for speakers around the world, that unless you go deep to your own experiences, your speech won't have an impact. And that's my greatest takeaway from all these different kind of workshops we've been having, that people realize that it doesn't have to be an essay. It doesn't have to be Einstein. It doesn't have to be, I don't know, people got what. It just has to be dive into your personal story and an authentic speech about that. Very simple. And I love how you approach it until today. So that's what I wanted just to say, because I'm
Thank
happy
you.
to see how many people realize that to their core. Thank you.
Yes, yes, thank you so much, Georgia. And because we're going to run out of time, I'm going to move on now. So if you have any burning questions, send them to the chat. But I'm going to follow up on that point from Georgia. It has to be personal. It has to be true. It has to be real. We've covered the why and the how. We're going to move on to what techniques you can actually use to bring all those ideas into practice. But let me begin with one key, basic, important, fundamental thought. When you write speeches, your sentences need to be short. As Georgia said, you're not writing an essay. This is not an academic essay. This is something you want your 15-year-old daughter and your 85-year-old grandma to understand. So short sentences, basic language. I'm going to share a few techniques with you as to how you can bring those ideas we've covered so far into a structure that makes sense. The whole world is now talking about storytelling, and I hate the word. It's been abused for so long. So last year I created my own word. Yes, I've created a word. I'm hoping it's added to the Oxford English Dictionary soon, and that's a storyology, a storytelling turned into science. And I'm going to be fast with this. There are 4 elements of a storyology, storytelling turned into science, that you need to include in every speech you write. So you've got your pen, you've got your paper. There are 4 things you need to write down, 4 things that you need to have clear in your mind. Number 1, the characters. Who are the human beings in this story? Me, my children, my friends, my boss, the Prime Minister. You need to identify the characters. Number 2, the conflict, the pain point, the problem, the challenge, the crisis, the issue. This happens, by the way, in any book, song, or film ever created in the history of humanity. There is always an issue. There's always something wrong that needs to be solved. You need to identify what you are solving, what the pain point is. Number 3, this is challenging, but it's key. Narrative and dialogue. What each character says to each other. Bringing dialogue and narrative into your speeches will help you with things like humor and will help you make your speech more real, more authentic. I'm not going to pretend that this is easy. It takes practice. But as you write your speeches, try and bring the words that some of those characters said to you or said to someone else. And number 4, conflict resolution. You need a happy ending with any story. And again, most songs, films, and books will have that happy ending. Even if it's not happy, it needs to be some kind of closure. And you need to bring that into a story. It will fit nicely into your conclusion and your call to action, but be mindful of the fact of bringing that story to an end with conflict resolution. That's a basic storyology structure. We could spend the next 3 hours talking about this, but we're not. We're going to move on to the second technique that I recommend, which I've been criticized for many times because it's so basic and so simple, and it's actually over simplistic. Believe me, it is not. And that's why we've got breakfast, lunch, and dinner. In any story you write, you need a short, punchy introduction, a deep body where you explain the complexity of your speech, and number 3, a brief, punchy, powerful, motivational conclusion with a call to action. So when you start writing and you don't know what to do, remember intro, body, and the end. You can also, and this is technique number 3 when it comes to the world of speech writing, you can build pyramids. What does that mean, Carlos? If you don't go for the storytelling and you don't go for 1, 2, 3, you've got 2 more options to write your speech and deliver your speech. You can start with something tiny, very simple, very personal, like your garden and how your garden has a positive impact on your family's well-being, and then gradually work your way down to the bigger issues, the more complex ones, like, for instance, climate change. You start small, you start close to you, and you start growing and expanding until you reach that climax where you share that message, that call to action at the end. Or you can apply what we call the inverted pyramid technique. You start with something really big, say the shifting of power from America to China, and then you work your way down to something very specific, like how on earth did the virus came out of China, and how has it impacted my family and my life for the last 18 months. Two silly examples, but you get the point, from the small to the big, or from the big to the small. And a fourth and final technique for all of us to consider before we move into the next breakout room. Yes, I know you're missing the chatter in the breakout rooms with your mates, and I'm accelerating my pace, so you're feeling a bit breathless because I'm speaking too fast, and it's time to give you a break. But before we do that, I'm going to cover this fourth technique, which I have baptized as a brief history of time. And for the scientists amongst you, and perhaps not only the scientists, you'll know that this is the title of one of the most important books in the history of humanity, which I will encourage you to read. But it's also a name I use to describe a technique of speech writing, which is based on time. So you begin in the past, then you move on to the present, and then you follow on to the future. So when you get that pencil and that piece of paper, and you don't know where to start, you don't know what to write, well, start from the beginning. A year ago, a month ago, a week ago, when I was a little child, yesterday evening, then you discuss the pain points, the dialogue and the narrative of the storytelling component into the present, and then this is where we're going with this. All right, so in addition to historiology, the pyramids and the 1 to 3, you've got this chronological approach to speech writing, which may sound easy and can be very useful. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to digest this photograph, and I'm going to take a sip of water while you do that. A good friend of mine from Toastmasters keeps reminding me that speech writing and speech delivery is like dancing with the audience, that is. And more often than I'd like, we see the speaker in this photograph being the lovely John Sargent here, dragging our audiences with our never-ending speeches, because we're not telling them where we're going. They have no idea what the destination is. They have no idea what the structure is. You have to dance with your audience in a way that you are synchronized, you are in tune, and both of you know where you're going. So when you're writing, think to yourself, does my audience know where I'm going with this? Does this make sense to the 50 people listening to me today? Do I need to go back and clarify something? Do I need to go forward? Do I need to go right or left? Do I need to stop and breathe? So as you write, think, am I leading my audience in this dance with me? And yes, leading is great, being in control is great, but when you write a speech and when you deliver a speech, it's always good to leave something unknown. You need some suspense, some intrigue, some surprise that hopefully you will leave for the end, in that glorious end of the speech climax. So that thunder, that surprise, that change driving component, that call to action, keep it to yourself until the end. You can hint, you can give ideas, you can suggest as you write the middle of your speech, but however much you lead, however much you dance, you want to save something for last. And very quickly, and I thought I was going to do the breakout room sooner than this. I'd forgotten about the sequence of my own slides. Hey, that's it for you. But one final thought when you write a speech is you have to do, what is this? Does anyone know?
What's in it for me?
Was that Nick? Ian? It doesn't matter. Thank you. Yes. What's in it for me? Is this piece I'm writing relevant to my audience? Is this interesting? Is this something they can connect with? Is it relevant? Is it motivational? It is inspirational? Is it persuasive? As you write, think, is there anything in here for my audience? And yes, at last, I've covered very quickly those 4 techniques, plus a few thoughts on how to dance and how to make sure that you stay relevant. Now we're gonna break out another room, which will last 5 minutes. And I'd like on this occasion, all of you to discuss other techniques for speech writing and speech building that you may find useful. Storytelling is the frame, if you like, for all of this. So it's important that in your groups to discuss storytelling, but in addition to the ones I've covered, the 1 to 3, the chronological order and the pyramids, you may know about others. If so, discuss and tell us.
Carlos, just a quick question.
Sure.
Did you click on join breakout room just now?
I clicked on leave breakout room.
No, but before that.
I'm not sure. I don't think I did anything.
Oh, so you didn't receive a message to ask you to join the breakout room?
No, I think I was included in it automatically, and then I left it.
Okay. Okay.
Was that right?
No, that was fine because your presentation was still up and everything was fine until you disappeared into the breakout room. So I was wondering whether the setting was for people to accept to go into a breakout room, but since they go in automatically, it makes things actually much smoother because you don't have to wait for people to find the button and so on.
Yes, great. I've lost the presentation, which means I will have to share my screen again, I suppose, which is fine. I'm running out of time, Ondra.
We have got another, so they will finish at 5 past and we'll have another 8 minutes. Is that enough time?
I'll have to raise a little, but yes, it should. It should be fine. I've lost my mouse. Somehow my pointer, Ondra, which is a bit of a problem because I cannot get my presentation back up.
Okay.
Now it's back. Okay, panic over.
Found it. I was actually thinking, have I got your presentation?
Okay, I've got it back. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, go for it.
Now?
Yeah, I should have thought of this actually. So what we usually do in events management is we ask people to send in their presentations, just in case something goes wrong, and then we share. We can.
So you work in event management, Ondra?
As well, it's a bit of everything. Communications and event management.
That explains why you're so good at this.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for your help tonight. It's priceless.
My pleasure. Okay, we've got 2 more minutes.
Great. That's good. It's gone a bit more quickly now. I'm going to have to raise a little. I'm aware that I'm speaking too quickly, but I have no choice. Otherwise, we'll run out of time.
Just looking, you've got 29 slides, and you're at slide 21. So I think there should be.
Yeah, we're almost there. Yeah.
Our 2 panelists have arrived as well. They're in breakout rooms as well.
Great.
We're mingling with the normal folk.
Yes, I spoke with Judith earlier, but I haven't spoken with Matthew yet. Yeah, it will be nice to get them to talk later. Yeah, and share their opinions as well.
That's true. Okay, so I think I'm ready to
Great.
Close them. Shall we give them until 5 past?
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. Good idea.
Yeah. So it was as predicted the last time. Some people just came out immediately.
Right.
Came out of the breakout room. So that will then mean we've got a few minutes. Okay, I'm going to close the rooms now.
Okay, thank you.
So they have 60 seconds to return.
Okay. I'm not on mute, Andrew, am I? Great, great. Well, we're starting to get people back from the breakout rooms. I hope they were intense, heated, productive discussions. I'm sure they were. And as we did earlier, if you've got anything you'd like to share verbally or in the chat, please do, so we can all benefit from your conversations. Either chat or raise your hand on Zoom and Andra will bring you to life.
Okay, so 10 seconds left and everyone will return.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we should have everybody or almost everybody back now, and as we did earlier, share life if you wish, and if not, send us your messages so we can all learn. Alan? No, I thought.
Sorry, I muted myself by mistake.
That's okay, Alan, no worries. No worries. Okay, 3 more seconds. Any brave souls out there? No, I'm gonna move on because otherwise.
No. George Anderson had.
Yeah.
Okay, George, go for it, please. Thank you.
Right, it was just, we talked in our room about the technique to, well, 2 techniques. One, to sort of parachute somebody into the middle of a story rather than the linear chronology, to go into the middle and then to draw back and to give the context. Yes. And then maybe go into the past. And also the loop around as well. So you tell a story, you make a point, you ask a question at the beginning of the presentation, and at the end you refer back to it to bring the whole thing into a nice, neat arc.
Very advanced and very good. I like it. Thank you, George and Tim. That's great. Looks like
we've got a few more raised hands.
Okay, please be quick. Go for it.
Paul, would you like to go next?
Yeah, just to re-emphasize that last point, that sometimes when you make a speech, so storytelling can be within a component of a speech. So you might make a point and then use a story to reinforce that point, or you may come out with the story and then make the point afterwards. Also, I think in storytelling, you should aim after you create it to craft it in such a way that you accentuate the audio, kinesthetic and visual images that the audience experiences.
Very good. Thank you for that, Paul. Very rich contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you to the other ones as well. Unfortunately, we're running behind time, so if you kindly could share your thoughts via chat, that would be very much appreciated. But thank you. It's so good to see that in a Toastmasters meeting workshop, people are eager to speak. So
they are indeed. Thank you all very much. I'm sorry we cannot cover you all, but hopefully you can submit those through the chat. I've covered the 2 main chunks out of the 4. We are coming to the end, but before I do that, I've got 2 extra pieces of material of speech writing philosophy that I'd like to share with you. The first one is about editing and feedback. So you've written your speech using all the wonderful techniques we've discussed today, and you say to yourself, I've got it. This is it. No, that speech needs to be read, reviewed, critiqued, and listened to by other human beings. And most people will tend to use their children and their wives, which is a lovely idea. It backfired when I tried 10 years ago, so make sure you don't do it with your first or second speech. You're not ready, and neither are they. But whether it's family, friends, or colleagues, your speech needs to be seen by somebody else. They will make amendments, they will make suggestions, they will contribute ideas, and they will make it better and richer. A speech is only written and ready when it's been reviewed by your peers. So make sure you go through that process. And finally, I'd like to speak about the concept of the two lives that any speech has. When you write a speech, your speech has one life as a written document. And we'll hear later from Matthew Rees about what political speech writing and writing a speech in the White House is like. But when you write a speech, that's a document that you'd like to keep for the rest of your life because it will become part of your personal library of stories. That speech could become a post for social media. It could become part of a book you write in the future. It could become part of another speech you give in 5 months or 5 years' time. So there is the one life as the one written document, and you want that to be detailed word by word in full and as clear as possible. So you've got your speech there. A second life for your speech is the speech you deliver in front of your audience, and that will bring in things like humor, body language, and all the wonderful things that come with live public speaking. So be clear about this. The speech you write is not necessarily the speech you deliver. Yes, the written speech will inform your delivery, but they are different products, and you have to be mindful of that distinction. Yes, write it, and write it following all the techniques we've discussed today, but be mindful of the fact that delivering live with or without notes is a different story and possibly an idea for another workshop, but that will come another day. Before I say thank you and goodbye, I'd like to summarize very quickly the 3 or 4 ideas we've covered today. Either you're a writer or you are an illustrator, but wherever you are, pick up that pencil and paper and get started with the 3 or 4 techniques we've covered today: the storyology, building pyramids, and dancing. And I'm sure you'll never forget that photograph from Strictly Come Dancing. And then finally, that concept of the 2 lives every speech has. I'm sure you've all taken copious notes and contemporaneous notes about everything I've said. If you haven't, there are a number of resources that you could go to tonight, tomorrow, next month, next year. They've been really useful to me, and I hope they will be for you. And now I'm going to cover that final section of my piece today on resources and a call to action. Are you ready? Yes, you are. I'm going to recommend 5 books to all of you, which have been really helpful to me, and I know will be helpful to you. They are useful in speech writing, but on public speaking in general. Out of these 3, the best one by far is the one on the left, The Storyteller's Secret, which I strongly recommend to all of you. And I've got 2 more. These 2 are very academic, not always easy to follow, but the one on the left is a great example of written speeches. That first life I spoke about, written speeches from the former president of the USA, Barack Obama. One of my favorite books, so educational and so inspirational. And the one on the right from Cambridge University Press, again, very detailed, very tough, very academic, sometimes difficult to follow, but priceless in terms of equipping you with the techniques and the theory you need as you write your speeches. Perhaps another day we can discuss the choice of photographs on that book cover and why, amongst other things, Sarah Palin is the only woman. But again, that's a conversation for another day. Everything I've said today will only make sense, will only be useful, will only be real when you write your own speech. And one speech that all of you need to have, whether you're a politician, a Toastmaster, wherever you are in life, you need your keynotes. You need that 10 to 15 minute speech that tells the world who you are, what your story is, what change you want to drive, what change you want to make, and what you are about. And you need to sit down, write it down, and be clear about what your keynote speech is. And you can do that with everything, hopefully, you've learned today. So this is my call to action for all of you. Go away, use everything you've heard today to write your keynote, and that one piece will inform your public speaking and speech writing career. The conversation with me, between us, hopefully begins now at the end of this session. I'm happy to talk, as you can see, happy to listen as well, and happy to engage in any conversations you may want to have. But for now, until the next time, thank you. Back to you, Andrea.
Thank you, Carlos. A round of applause for Carlos. We're now closing the first part of the meeting, and we'll have the opportunity to have 5 minutes break. We're running a bit behind, so please come back in 5 minutes. That's 20 minutes past 8. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you in 5 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Anne. Oh, no, you're mute. You're on mute. Oh.
It says unmute. The mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I am not in the meeting. I have not been able to join the meeting. I don't have a meeting ID or personal link to type in the top to get into the meeting. You can't hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. We can see you as well.
And you're more than welcome to stay logged in on your phone. So it works perfectly, unless you want to log in for other reasons.
Well, I'd like to see who's there. I'd like to see the main speaker in the center.
I see.
Gallery. I can't see anything. I'm just a little phone here.
Let me send you the ID.
Oh, thank you so much. That's what I wanted all the way through.
How can I do that? Can I just tell it to? Can I say?
Yes. Just tell it. Just tell it to me, and I'll write it down.
Okay. Just one quick second, please. Okay.
I'm just waiting to type it in now.
Okay, so sorry, just need to quickly log in. Okay, so the ID for this meeting is 841.
841, yes.
7054.
7054.
1423.
1423. And then underneath?
There is no passcode, so you should be able to join. Just
unable to join the meeting. This meeting ID is not valid. Please check and try again.
You have access to the chat, to this chat here right now.
Yes.
On your phone.
Yes.
Copy the invitation. The link. And we'll try that way.
It says screen photos, cloud, Dropbox.
Just chat. If you go to chat.
Well,
you have muted yourself, Anne. So, Anne, I have sent you the Zoom link, but since it's on your phone, I'm not sure you'll be able to connect. Have you got Let me see if I can find, we're about to start the second section. I'm trying to look for you and see if I can find your email address to send you. The link via email. I found you. So I'm going to, please expect an email from me in any second now. So a direct link to the meeting should reach your email address in a few seconds. Nick, we're ready, I think.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please keep yourself muted, but switch your cameras back on as we return to the second half of today's delightful Toastmasters meeting. And I'd like to hand you over to our Toastmaster of the evening, who this evening will be Enka. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nick. Welcome, everyone. This is the second part of our meeting, and we are so excited to have a panel discussion on speechwriting in action. Our panel moderator this evening is Henry Bowles, and he knows a little bit about speechwriting. He, in fact, knows speechwriting well. He's finishing a doctorate in ancient Greek and Roman rhetoric at the University of Oxford, but his first doctorate was from Harvard University, also on rhetoric in Arabic, Persian, Greek, and Latin. He's been a Toastmaster for almost 8 years, the president of Oxford Orators, and he has been a District 91 finalist in the International Speech Contest. Please join me in welcoming Henry Bowles. Over to you, Henry.
July 27, 2004, just before 10 p.m. The Fleet Center Stadium in Boston, it's a crowd of 15,000. And a young Illinois state senator takes the stage to give the keynote at the Democratic National Convention. He's largely written the speech by himself, by hand, and often late at night. He's still a virtual nobody, to quote the Washington Post, and it's basically the first time that he has used a teleprompter. That speech makes him a rock star. The Post refers to it as the 17 minutes that launched a political star. The speaker? Barack Obama. That is the power of great speech writing and a great speaker. The Greeks and Romans knew this well. Gorgias, 2,500 years ago, likens good speaking to a magic potion. Okay, he calls it a drug, a pharmacon, that seizes the audience's mind. And you're about to learn some of this power from our panel this evening. You will learn from Judith Humphrey that speech writing is not just for the grand political statement, that scripting makes us better communicators everywhere, from the elevator to the meeting room to your next table topic. Judith is a pioneer in leadership communications. Her books, Speaking as a Leader and Impromptu, are new classics. And she regularly writes for Fast Company magazine. Judith also specializes in gender communications. Her book, Taking the Stage, guides women to do just that. Her next book helps job candidates craft a compelling narrative for themselves. Please join me in welcoming Judith Humphrey. Let's unmute and applaud. Exactly. And you'll learn from Matthew Rees a bit about how those grand political statements work. Matt was a speechwriter for President George W. Bush, for the National Security Advisor, Condoleezza Rice, and for the US Trade Representative, Robert Zoellick, and more. He's worked as a journalist at The Economist, at the New Republic, and the Wall Street Journal, again, and more. And Matt is the founder of Geonomica, an editorial consulting firm that works with clients on speeches, on books, on white papers, again, and more. Please join me in welcoming, unmuted, Matthew Rees. And you'll learn from Carlos Gimeno. You may know him, how to incorporate speech writing into your Toastmasters journey. Carlos is a distinguished Toastmaster and a former president of this very club. He has 16 years of experience in international publishing sales. And for the last 4, he's been running a public speaking coaching consultancy in Oxford and Valencia, Spain. And last year, as you just saw, he published his first book, Public Speaking, A Very Practical Introduction. Please join me in welcoming Carlos Gimeno. Here's the agenda. So for the next 30 minutes or so, you'll hear a discussion among Judith, Matt, and Carlos based on questions that you sent me. And I invite you along the way during the discussion to write down any new questions you get, because you'll have a chance to ask them to our panelists in a Q&A section at the end. My first question goes to Judith. Welcome. When we think of speech writing, we often think of formal speeches, either the big political speeches or the big corporate speeches. But how can scripting benefit us beyond the formal speech?
There. Am I unmuted?
You're unmuted.
Henry, it's so important to script yourself even when you're speaking informally. And over the years, I've taught a lot of clients how to speak informally by scripting themselves. The reality is that if you don't script yourself, you may hem and haw, you use filler words. We hear so many be that, or I'm not sure, or, you know, their hesitations, they'll say, that's a good question, just stalling for time. So it's very difficult in the moment to organize one's thoughts. And so what happens when we don't script ourselves informally is we speak without clarity, without that destination, without that sense of message. And if there's no message, then there's no leadership. And so by scripting yourself informally, you can really create that sense of destination, create that sense of message and the power of the message to persuade, and you know where you're going. So definitely have to script yourself. Now, it could be a script you write out, you take notes on and you follow that, you learn it, you internalize it. Or it could be a script that you create in your mind when somebody asks you a question. If you're in a Q&A situation and someone asks you a question, if you have a template or a script in your mind, a model of a script in your mind, and you immediately use that to generate your answer, let's say. So yes, scripting is important informally.
Judith, thank you so much. Matt and Carlos, on this power of the informal script, is there anything that you would add?
I'll defer to Carlos.
Thank you, Matt. I love Judith's response, Henry. The one only thing I would like to add is, whenever you're speaking informally or impromptu, and even with that mental script, that there are 2 things that will help you and will help you gain time. And those things are, say thank you and smile. And hopefully you'll come up with something sensible to say.
I love that. Thank you, Carlos. And thank you again, Judith. My next question, and this is by popular demand, this is for Matt. Matt, what's a day like in the life of a political speechwriter?
Well, thank you, Henry, and thanks for the group for having me. So when I was at the White House, there's a whole process in which a speech is supposed to be written, but it's like the old saw about you don't want to see how the sausage is made. And the reality is, even though you're dealing with the President of the United States and competent people around him, it can often be a messy process. And one of the challenges for a political speechwriter, frankly, is just trying to figure out, you know, what is it that we want to say, or what is it that the president wants to say? And I was of the view that the speechwriter, with all due respect to everyone here, the speechwriter really should not be driving the policy decisions made by the President of the United States. And so often that was a big challenge because a speech would go on the schedule and no one had really thought through, okay, what is it that, what do we want to say, or what is the policy that's going to be announced here? So that's a big issue that often, frankly, speeches are treated as what is sort of would be called a forcing mechanism, which is to say, if we don't know what the policy is, well, if the president has to talk about it, then we better figure out what the policy is going to be, and it forces all of the policy experts to come together and figure out, so what do we actually think about this? So then the speechwriter gets the guidance, and again, this may happen over the course of, it could be a few days or a few weeks. It's going to vary depending on the significance of the speech. The part of the process and then you have the writing process, which is relatively straightforward in terms of you're sitting in front of your computer, but where things often get a little dicey is, so you would produce a draft of the speech, and then you have what's called the clearance process, which is to say that the speech would be circulated to maybe the 10 or 15 people who really have something to say about this. And so you'd have this speech, this draft, and it would go around to all of them, and then all of the comments would come back. And this was where I felt, again, it was more authority than I really wanted, which is I was the one left with the decision as to say, if Condoleezza Rice has a comment on the speech and Karl Rove or the chief of staff also has a comment, and they might conflict with each other, it was left up to me to decide which one to incorporate, which again, really more power than I wanted, and sort of someone's going to be upset, and they're going to blame the speechwriter, which is never a great position to be in. But somehow then, that process that I'm describing to you was often happening over the course of just a few hours. So that was very, very stressful. Eventually, the speech would go to the president, or it would go out of your hands, and in the case of President Bush, the routine was on the day he was giving a speech, you needed to be in the office at 7 a.m., which was typically when he was at his desk. And then you would sit by the phone and wait. And sometimes he would just pick up the phone and he would call the speechwriter with a question, he wasn't calling to say, this is a great speech. It was typically, there's something here that doesn't quite make sense, and we need to get this figured out. And so that was never a fun call to get, but it was, again, because often the speech might be an hour or two away. And again, the speechwriter, I was not, this happened on a few occasions. The one that comes to mind is there was a bioterrorism bill, and I certainly was not an expert on bioterrorism, but I had to get the answer, and he asked me a question, and I was hemming and hawing and didn't really know the answer, and he just sort of cut me off and said, why don't you call someone and get the answer, which was exactly the right, because you don't really want to say to the President of the United States, I don't know, but sometimes that is the right answer. Anyway, and then somehow, you get the answer, and you hope that the person who gave you the answer actually knew what they were talking about. They are policy experts, so they should. And then somehow the speech ultimately does get delivered. And I'll just close by saying one lesson I also learned is that I found it extremely nerve-wracking to be present at a speech where I had written. It was almost like a nightmare scenario where I thought if something went wrong, the president or someone would point at me, right during the speech and say, why does it say this? Which of course would never happen, but I found that it was much, at the point at which the speech was being delivered, I was so tired of it. I was usually then having to focus on the next speech. I very rarely, if ever, attended speeches that the president was delivering that I had written.
Matt, thank you. That outlined, I think, wonderfully some of the processes behind the scenes. I think that was wonderful.
Thank you.
In thinking about speech writing as a forcing mechanism, to borrow Matt's phrase, in our own lives, Carlos, what have been your biggest aha moments as a communicator on your road to DTM in speech writing?
Okay. Well, I guess the one surprise I had earlier today when we did the poll was to see that 57% of you chose yourselves as the subject of your theoretical speech to the Harbour commencement address. It took me 10 years to realize that. So one thing I've come to learn, Henry, is that the more personal, the more real, the more authentic, the more important to you the speech is and the subject of the speech, the more impact and the more impact it will have, and the more change you will be able to drive. It's a fine balance between just talking about yourself. It's important to make it personal and make it real, but it's always useful. Actually, it's always vital to link that personal story to something bigger than yourself, to something that the audience can relate to. So yes, personal storytelling, truthful storytelling, but you need to find that what's in it for me component that links your story to the audience's story. And making that link is not always easy, and it took me a long time, and that was one of my biggest aha moments. The second one I will mention, if I may, Henry, is the call to action. I've seen and I've written myself so many speeches that look and sound great, but they finish, they stop with no call to action, with no call to change, with no real impact on your audience. And if you stand up to speak, you stand up to speak because you want hopefully change something and drive people to change a behavior or whatever, or help you with something or whatever it may be. So whatever you write, whatever you say, make sure there is a message that goes beyond the speech, that keeps you in your speech in the heads of your audience. And the next day or the next week or the next month, they go, yes, Carlos is a speech, and I'm going to do this as a consequence. And that second component, the call to action, is one of my biggest aha moments, Henry, in that 10-year journey. They may sound simple and basic, but if you can bring those two into your speeches, success is almost guaranteed.
Thank you, Carlos. Judith, to Carlos's first point in talking about ourselves and our story, for so many of us, talking about ourselves at work, just in those everyday, more informal situations, is a challenge. How can we promote our ideas, our personal brand professionally, but also elegantly and with tact?
I think it's really important to feel that you can express your ideas, let's say in a meeting or in a one-on-one. We shouldn't be cowed in any way, and we should feel comfortable articulating our views. So that's a given. Now, the question is how to do it effectively, which is what you're asking. I think it's very important not to feel as though we have to be the dominant voice in any discussion. Let's say a team meeting, it's really important to gauge how much you're speaking compared with how much others are speaking. And if you're speaking more than the other people in the room, that's bad. That's not refined. So don't talk more than other people. The second thing is don't take people on. Don't go head to head with people. So many business situations, there is conflict of thinking. And out of that conflict comes clarity. But you don't want to go head to head or dismiss someone publicly. It's just not gracious to do that. So let's say you do differ with somebody. You might say to that person, I see where you're coming from, but I take a slightly different point of view. That's collegial rather than confrontational. You also want to build on what people said, call upon people, cite their viewpoint, build your ideas around the group's ideas. And you really want to be collaborative in your discussions assumption, bind people together in their thinking rather than isolating people, and use collaborative language. Say all of us in the room, we here. Don't say I all the time. I mean, these are subtle differences, but if you really want to be a good team leader or a good team member in a business environment, you want to use collaborative language and build upon the words and the thinking of others. It's an art, as you say. It's
Judith, thank you. You froze for a second at the end, but I think we caught 95%. If I'd like to thank you. I'd like to follow up on this idea of us, which you mentioned at the beginning, often being cowed, thinking that our ideas aren't worth even voicing, and then some people, of course, go to the other extreme, usually probably out of insecurity. Your book, Taking the Stage, talks about how women especially often deal with that inner crow, that inner critic. How can scripting, or what methods have you found that can help women to silence that crow?
That's a very interesting topic, and that's a whole subject in itself. But we found, and I say we in the Humphrey Group, a business that I founded and built, we found that women were speaking very differently from men. That wasn't the assumption I went into the business with, but we began to see women dismissing themselves, apologizing. They would say, I just have a little thought, or I could be wrong. So we started seeing this play of the inner crow, dismissing women for what they were thinking and being afraid to speak up. The crow inside their minds, the mind of many women, not all women, will say, oh, you're not smart enough, you're not prepared enough, you're not as up on this topic as you should be to speak up. So the crow has many reasons why a woman should be silenced, and we silence ourselves. If you think about it, the way around that, or the way through it, is that women need to know that they are in fact saying something. They really believe something, they want to share it, and they have a right to speak. And they have a right to take the stage, to quote my book title. And so creating a script, even for informal events, let's say somebody has to do a project update at a meeting. Creating a script in advance gives that woman a sense that she really has something to say, something she owns, something she wants to share with the group. And so scripting herself in advance of that meeting is so powerful and so important. And she'll actually sound more confident when she delivers that material, because she knows what she's talking about. She has a message. She has built a way of building a case for that message. She has a call to action. She goes in there with a lot of strength and a lot of confidence. Without a script, it's just the crow talking. So, and men, I don't mean to say all women are like that, or men don't have those uncertainties about what they're about to say, but we found that women do that more than men do.
Yeah. Judith, wonderful. Thank you. My next question is for Matt. If we go back to Obama's DNC convention keynote, what do you think made it so impactful? I guess that's my first question. My second would be, let's kind of repurpose McLuhan here. Is the messenger the message? I mean, could Al Gore have delivered that speech?
Right. Thank you, Henry. It's a great question. Yeah, look, the messenger is a critical part of a great speech. And Barack Obama had not a unique background, but certainly a very distinctive background. And so the message that he was delivering, and it was obviously complemented by a distinctive, a name that you would not typically hear in American politics. And then just given his mixed race background, made him a very powerful messenger. And I was just going to read you, there's one line in the speech that really jumps out at me. He says, "I stand here knowing that my story is part of the larger American story, that I owe a debt to all of those who came before me, and that in no other country on earth is my story even possible." Now, that may or may not be true, that in no other country could that work, but that obviously, that in a strictly a crass political sense, that is a powerful message for someone of his background to put forward this really very strongly, maybe not nationalistic, but just very pro-American message that for someone, again, with his background and his father being from Africa, to deliver this message, I think helped distinguish him. And then obviously he's an incredibly talented orator. And so you kind of combine all of these different factors. And yeah, you have, Henry, as you so artfully pointed out, it was sort of a speech that launched his political career in a way that very rarely happens in American politics. But I think it's fair to say that absent that speech, it would have been much more challenging for him to have won the Democratic nomination and ultimately to have won the presidency in 2008.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you. Carlos, when do you know that you've got it right? How do you know that you've written a good speech, that it's ready? You know, nothing's ever going to be totally perfect, but it's ready for you to go, either for you or for your clients.
Well, let me begin by saying, as you mentioned, Henry, that no speech is ever perfect or a 10 out of 10. There's always room for improvement. But for me, I know that the speech is ready and I am ready when I'm able to deliver without reading, when I am able to improvise. Obviously, having the script that Judith mentioned is fundamental. Being prepared is important, but I've never memorized my speeches verbatim. So when I am feeling so comfortable that I'm able to bring new elements that didn't appear in the original, I know that that speech is a good fit for me and will be a good fit for the audience, because they will see how comfortable I'm feeling with it. So I know it's right when it feels right. And I know it's right when I'm able to deliver without notes and with the capacity to improvise. And the final point I will add, going back to my presentation earlier, and Matthew touched on this when he described the day of a speechwriter. I know my speech is right when somebody else has looked at it and said, it's actually right. So that editing, peer review process is fundamental to feel that you're there, that you're ready to go. If nobody looks at your speech, you may think, well, this is fantastic, but even if it flows, even if it feels right, even if you're improvising, my advice would be share it with others and let them make useful contributions.
Being in academia, I love the idea of peer review, Carlos. Thank you. Judith, my next question is a common occurrence in real life and also in our nightmares. So my boss calls on me unexpectedly in a meeting. What do I do other than panic?
Well, what could he be, or what could she be calling me in for? Figure that out. Because if you can figure that out in advance, you can create a script in your mind or on paper. You can be ready for it. But let's say you have no idea, which is often the case. So you go into the office, you listen to her, you hear an opportunity. You move it into a kind of scripting mode. As you're listening, you think, what am I going to say? And let's say your boss says, I have a new assignment for you, and describes it. So you start off with a grammar. Well, that's exciting. Thanks so much for your trust. Then you get to your message. You say, I'd be happy to take this on. So already you're glowing. Then you develop that message. I'll need people, I'll need resources, and of course, I'll need your support. 3 points to prove your message. And then you conclude. So when do you need this? Now that's a short speech that you can actually create on the spot. If you use what I have in my book is a leader's script template. You have a template with the opening, the message, some key points, and the call to action. You've got it. And you're golden, because if you can deliver that spontaneously, your boss loves you, right?
Yeah. Judith, Carlos, and Matt, we've already learned so much. And what I'd like to do now is to turn things over to the audience directly and see if we have any new questions. So feel free to use the raise your hand emoji or to unmute yourself. Any questions? Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. When professional speechwriters design a speech, do you think of the body language and the expression, the intonation that the speech giver should make during the speech? And if that's the case, how would you depict that in the script? Or do you leave it up to the speaker?
Judith, would you like to run with this one?
So the question is, when you work with a client or a speaker and you produce a speech, do you also guide them in body language and delivery?
Yeah.
Yes, it's very important that I believe anyway, and Matthew may have a different viewpoint on this, but when I worked with clients and when I worked with executives on their speeches, I would definitely rehearse them. And as I rehearsed them, I would talk about whether they're bringing out the main ideas, because you really want them to emphasize the key points, the key ideas, the call to action. And within sentences, there are certain words that carry the meaning of that speech more than others. There may be a theme or an event, but there's certain language that carries, what I say is there's certain language that is in the foreground and certain language that should recede. And you as a writer know what the language means and how much emphasis the language should be given. So you want to pull forward the important language, the important sentences, the message, the key ideas, and let the rest recede. That's one of the ways that you can, as a writer, coach the speaker. There are many other ways. For example, I've had clients who read it, but without the kind of passion that I feel is in the speech. So we talk about the passion, how to bring out the passion. And eye contact is very important, as we discussed, Carlos. You want to have eye contact at the end of a sentence. You want to have eye contact at the beginning of a sentence, at the end of a sentence. If your client's using a teleprompter, you want to make sure that they don't sound like they're using a teleprompter. That was one of the things about Obama when he first became president. He would shift his eyes from one side of the room where one teleprompter was to the other. And he would, and in fact, this continued for quite a while. He wouldn't look in the middle, but the TV audience was in the middle. So I would help a client use the teleprompter more effectively. In fact, I have a section in the book about Obama and the teleprompter. So there's so many ways you can guide a client when you give them a speech and then help them deliver it. Matthew, I'd be interested in your views on that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I was just realizing that I've been doing this for about 20 years, speech writing, both in politics and in the private sector. And I can really only think of one or two occasions when I've actually been called in for kind of rehearsal sessions. It's partly a function of writing for a lot of CEOs who I never even speak with and I don't end up meeting with. And in the case of the president, it was really only the most important speeches, such as the State of the Union or a declaration of war, where there would be a rehearsal, and that would be the chief speechwriter who was involved with that, and I was not the chief speechwriter. So unfortunately, I do not have much to offer on this in terms of personal experience, but I think, other than underscoring, Judith, what you have said in terms of the value of the rehearsal, and I just know from my own public speaking that it's one thing to write something and then you actually say it and it doesn't sound right at all, and I think we've probably all had that experience.
Wonderful. Anka, I saw your hand up. Would you like to go ahead?
I think we've got two guests with raised hands. They can go first.
Shruti.
Hello, everybody. Hi. Hello, guests. Hello, speakers. Sorry. My question is for Judith. I'd like to know how much. Yes, it's important to have your script ready and it gives you confidence, 100%. But how much do you say one should prepare? So that there is space for improvisation. Like, of course, you don't want to, remember your speech by heart, because then you'll just be, you might go in the zone of just narrating your speech or just, So what's the correct balance, and what kind of techniques would you suggest to make sure that you're prepared enough and yet there is, room for improvisation?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You don't want to be so scripted that you sound as though you're reading something from your mind. I'd say when you prepare a script in advance of an informal event, and let's take as an example. Let's say you're going to be typical meeting scenario. So you can either wing it and hope for the best, or you can decide the night before to create a short script. And here's what I would put in the script. I would put your opening. So a sentence or two that bridges from the meeting. It could be, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to share with you our progress on this project. Your message comes next. So the second element you want in your script is just a single sentence message. We've made huge progress. I'm making this up, but that would be a typical message. And just deliver it with passion. Then you'd want to give some reasons why you've made huge progress. So give maybe 2 or 3 points that prove that message. Are you still with me? Okay, and then the end would be your call to action. So what? As you said, Carlos, what's the point of speaking unless there's something that the audience needs to do in response? Otherwise, you will not have led them. So what's your call to action? Do you want to thank your team? Do you want to say, we're moving ahead to the next phase with your support, looking at your boss? Those are the elements. In my books, I talk about the leader's script. Those are the elements in what I call the leader's script. It doesn't take very long to draft that kind of a script. And then you learn it. You think about it. You're on the train going to work or working from home. And you try to internalize that script. And then you're called upon and you've got it ready. That's exactly how you work with the informal situations. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
Good.
Thank you, Shruti, and thank you, Judith. For our last question, I will call on Vasiliki.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for your useful input. Henry, I loved your questions. They were lovely. My question is this. When I write a speech, sometimes I remember two texts. I go to two texts, The Politics of the English Language by Orwell and Getting to Yes, which is actually a book by Urey and Fisher and somebody else. Is there any inspirational resource you go to when you want to write a speech and you have like, you need to start from somewhere? And I would like to hear from all three of you if that is possible.
Matthew, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question in terms of an inspirational text. I would say that there's not one that comes to mind. I have in the past, there are these. Well, in the past it would have been books. Now I guess it would obviously all be online, but just these books that have collections of quotes on different subjects, and sometimes it sort of helps to spark your creativity, even if you don't end up using the quote, because as we all know, sometimes the most challenging part of a speech is just actually writing that first sentence or that first paragraph, and it's useful to understand or recognize that, again, you may not, all of that may get deleted, but just getting that sort of that creative process going. And I would say related to that may not be a text, it may just be having a conversation with someone. I often find that it's one thing I can sit on my computer and think, and then maybe I just take a walk, or maybe I have a phone conversation with someone, and it's a whole different kind of thought process and new ideas that come to mind. So I think those would be two things. Again, doing something away from the computer, again, maybe having that conversation, or just taking a walk and being alone in your thoughts can be quite useful.
Thank you. What about the rest of the speakers?
I think it depends on whether you're writing for yourself or you're writing a speech for someone else. Whenever I wrote for someone else, I would always interview them and probe, get their insights on that topic and really go deep with that. Could be a 2-hour interview. So if I'm writing for somebody else, I go to them first, which goes with what Carlos was saying about write about yourself. If I'm writing a speech for myself, say when I left the company, when I said goodbye to my company, the Humphrey Group, I thought a lot about what I was going to say. I wrote 14 drafts. I'm terrible that way. Because every time I thought about it, I would come up with another idea, another anecdote, another example. So I think it's just, there's no one source of inspiration, but you want to think about the subject, the person who's giving the speech, and think hard about experiences that would drive the point home that you want to make. Mm-hmm. And it's once you focus on the subject, the speaker himself or herself, you'll find gold for your speech.
Do you feel like you are an actress while you're writing? Like, for example, if let's say you write a political speech about Angela Merkel, okay? So do you feel like, let's be Angela Merkel and write the speech? Do you go into that process?
I'm sorry, do you what?
Do you, sometimes actors and actresses, the person, so they become the person in the process in order to act. Do you feel like that when you write? Because sometimes I do that, and I find it interesting.
That because I'm not good at pretending I'm somebody else. I think I think the best thing is to, if you're writing for someone else, you probe, you ask about their life, you ask what's been important to them, what their fears are, what their greatest sense of joy comes from. Yeah, I mean, it depends, of course, on who the audience is. You always start with the audience. Like, why did that speaker get invited? If you're the speaker, why did I get invited? What do they want from me? What am I supposed to say that's going to inspire them? And it really comes down to wanting to inspire an audience with a story, as Carlos said. And so you start with the audience, presumably they invite you for a reason, or the speaker you're writing for. What do they need to know? What do they need to feel? It's really not even knowledge. I mean, if you want to inspire, you want to talk about what do they need to feel. I mean, they can get any knowledge on the internet. So as a speechwriter or as a speaker, you don't want to inform, you want to inspire. And that comes, inspiration comes by touching the hearts, touching the feelings of people in your audience. So you have to really start with your audience. And you figure out, who am I talking to in this audience? It might not be everybody. There might be one person in the audience that you're really trying to address the speech to. Anyway, we could have a whole other discussion about how you decide what to say in a speech, because it's a wonderful topic, and I'm glad you answered it. I hope I haven't been hogging the stage.
No. Thank you, Judith. It's wonderful. I will add, Vasiliki, if I may, one or two quick points on top of what Matthew and Judith have said. One point I take from both Judith and Matthew is, especially when you write about other people or for other people, the biggest source of inspiration, motivation, and stories will be people themselves, Vasiliki. So ask the speaker, ask their family, ask their friends, ask their co-workers, and extract as many stories as you can from them. Obviously, data, whether it's a technical presentation or a political speech, you're going to need data from journals, books, reports, databases, and so on and so forth. But if you're writing for other people, will be your main source. Ask questions, interview, and extract the stories. If you're writing for yourself, and I will share with you what works for me, you've got two sources of motivation or inspiration. One is, or one should be, the one thing you want to change in this world, Vasiliki. The one thing you're about, the one thing you're really interested in. You may not know, that's fine. Spend time thinking about it, but your source of inspiration has to be your change, the change you want to drive, your ethos, your philosophy, your story, the impact you want to drive. For me, the other source of inspiration and motivation, which is very sophisticated, is called YouTube. From a public speaking point of view, I'm a big fan of Tony Blair and Barack Obama. I've watched hundreds of speeches from them both. I'm not Tony Blair or Barack Obama, I'm Carlos Gimeno, but I can bring elements of their performances and their speeches and apply them to my story and my style. And I find that can work really well. So find a role model on YouTube and devour as much content as you can.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for the tips.
Thank you, Vasiliki. I'm going to conclude the panel with a call to action. Let's all please unmute. And I want to thank our speakers. We've learned so much. We've had three incredible panelists. From Judith, we've learned about the power of speechwriting writ large, how it can permeate and should permeate almost every aspect of our lives. From Matt, you've taken us into a fascinating, and for many of us, a new world. And Carlos, you've given us so much insight into telling our personal story and motivation and insight on progressing along our Toastmasters pathways. So let's unmute and all thank our three incredible panelists.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci, danke, grazie.
Fantastic work.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henry, for organizing this panel. And thank you to all the panelists, Carlos, Judith, and Matthew. They all have been inspirational tonight. I really loved Carlos' personal and powerful personal approach to speech writing and public speaking. I also loved Judith's fantastic inspirational advice to women, and because that really resonates with many of us. And I also loved hearing Matthew's rich experience writing for great politicians, but also for the greater good. So thank you very much. And I will pass now over to our president, Rebecca, to finalize the meeting tonight. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Anka. This evening, I did not find the magic wand, but I guess it's like learning a language. Giving a speech, giving a good speech involves lots of time and effort. However, I do have a better direction because I've learned a lot this evening, and I hope everyone has learned as well. One of the takeaways I would say, writing a speech is not writing an essay, because I come from academia as well. So all about theories, frameworks, and the concepts, all that sort of stuff. But actually, we should be talking as personal, conversational, true, and real. But I do have sympathy for Matthew Rees, who did not have the joy of writing for himself or about himself. Like us, we can do that. Finally, I would like to thank everyone on the committee working behind the scene, but particularly Anka, Andra, and Sandra. And I know we're running out of time, so I'm not going to ask the guests and club members to share our wonderful experience this evening, but we will stay for about 10 to 20 minutes if you would like to join us. Now, I would like to close the meeting. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, all the panelists and the Carlos. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.